I kind of owe.
45 to.
Speaking of grandma, I owe her an apology and a new pan. Look what I did to that one egg pan that she has.
Yes. Oh, nice.
I wanted to show you that. I effed up a steak, Mom, but you know what? It still tasted good and was edible.
Throw it out.
Was it like
Just
eating?
throw it out. She doesn't even remember.
Yeah, I never used it, but I used one of the. I guess it's a tender, whatever. It's like this one fit perfectly. I was like, let me just do it, and I burned everything. My apartment.
Did you ruin the steak?
No, the steak was fine. Surprisingly, the steak was the steak survived. It was a solid steak. I think the pan's just too small for anything other than one egg. That was a
filet mignon, probably.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
If it was tiny, that was a filet mignon, and you don't want to waste that steak. Throw the pan out.
Yeah.
More about the steak. It costs 4 times that pan.
I have no real use for it. Because usually I eat multiple eggs at a time. I never do one egg. Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, everyone wants to know, how was Parents' Weekend at the fraternity? I need the full story, Ma.
It was good. Nothing too out of control. Pretty mellow. I didn't realize that the sororities in Penn State, they don't have houses. So they do theirs with a fraternity, if you will. So I asked Mike, why are all these blonde-haired girls walking around the pit? They can't all be sisters, family members.
Right.
It's just as Parents' Week, and you don't normally bring your siblings unless they're little kids. And he says, oh, that's the sorority. They're not allowed to have a house. So they join with us.
That's weird.
There's a law in Pennsylvania. 9 women living together, more than 9 constitutes a brothal, so they don't allow it.
Is that actually true? Wow.
That's what he said. I don't know if it's true or not, but they don't allow sororities, which I think that's so odd. I just assumed Penn State had sorority houses. I mean, you can have sororities. They just can't all live in a house. So
wow.
It's unique.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I heard of that.
But other than that, the pit was good. They had a good turnout. We got there late because I thought it was in the evening, but they had burgers, hot dogs, looked like good food. We had already eaten though because we were starving. Raising Cane's.
Raising Cane's? Did you really? Oh, too bad. I should have given you my gift card because the nearest Raising Cane's for me is 114 miles away.
There was one in.
Turns out I was wrong. And Bojangles sucks.
Airports. I know they're in the airports down there.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
You definitely will be using it if you go through Charlotte or something like that. But anyhow, we had already eaten, and I just assumed we'd be eating dinner, but they were already done with the grill. And, you saw Mike's keg stand.
Yeah, I hope I have to ask him if I could post that in the video.
Don't you embarrass me. I'll be fine. I was like, he's just gonna go, baby, go, baby, go.
That was a good video. Kenny told me Dad was the one holding his legs. I didn't realize that.
No, it
oh,
was
okay,
not.
okay, good. I was gonna say there's no way Dad was doing that. I was like, I hope Dad didn't even see that, let alone.
But one of the brothers came up to us. Actually, the very first brother that was there when Mike moved in last year as a newbie to the fraternity, made a comment like, "You're so smart to move out, Mike." It's just still, they quote unquote cleaned it for Parents' Weekend, and it was better, but it was still a pit. It's just an absolute pit, and even Mike's place, it's 10 times better, but it's still a dorm. It stinks in the hallway.
Right. Did you guys stay at his place?
We did, yes. We were troopers. I don't think I did yet.
The bathroom, you have to take a plunger every time.
No, the bathroom. Well, it was. I'm not even going to go into that because I'm not even going to talk about it. But
I'm noticing my.
It was fine by the time I got there because I cleaned it. Obviously, I'm not using that bathroom. So I knew I was going to clean it. I just didn't realize the depth I would have to clean it.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's just he doesn't have. His place. He has a lot of space, but he has no decent space.
Yeah.
So, he slept in. The irony is, one of his roommates, who's never there,
came back.
Not the one who went to Europe. He was there for the one night, which it's fine. It's his place. He never uses it. But it kind of crimped. Like I probably would have slept outside or something like that, but I didn't want to be in the way. So Dad and I crammed into Mike's room because he's got the futon in there. He's got the bed.
Oh.
He moved his desk into one of the other rooms. So anyhow, it was tight. The space was tight, but it worked out fine.
Where'd he sleep?
It was just an overnight. He slept in, he calls it his office now. He took over the other Mike's room, put his desk in there,
Right.
and they put there's twins in there, so he put them together, and you know, he says the bed's really uncomfortable, but he slept on it anyhow. So
And then
he's only got a month left.
yeah, I know. Which is wild. I keep seeing, I like that one of the big trends right now on TikTok is like younger or older sisters sending a video of their younger brother and then how he grew up. And that's how I'm seeing Michael now. I'm like, shit. Because I have a couple videos from when Mike was young.
Yeah.
But was Michaela with Bo, right? Did Michaela watch Bo? Or?
Yeah, we were only about an hour at
that's
the
not bad.
fraternity. Yeah, no, there was nothing really, unless you're a hard drinker and Mike's not. And even later on, there was an quote-unquote after party. It was the disco in the basement where Mike said, there's no way you want to go. It stinks by now. The doors are shut. It's all sloppy drunk people. Like, thanks.
Have you ever been in that basement? Because that basement is ugly. I remember that basement. It's literally like a dungeon. Sorry, Alpha Pi Delta.
They put a DJ. They put a DJ in there. They had the disco lights going, but the doors were open out to the pit, so at least you had some air. It was dark. I can't imagine it at night, and I was just like, thanks. We don't need to go back.
I don't know how many of Michael's fraternity brothers watch the podcast, but were there any like parents where you were like, no names, but were you like, holy crap, thank God? Like, were you like, I am here and they're down here? You know what I mean?
I'm not saying anything. Who am I to judge?
That's what I figured.
I just one mom do a keg stand, and I rolled my eyes.
Yeah, I knew that was gonna happen at some point.
Yeah,
there's always that one cool mom, quote unquote. Single.
The other thing I was disappointed about was Dad did not bring the Stetson because it was a cowboy theme. So there was a few parents there with their cowboy hats on, like pink ones and stuff like that.
Yeah, most people don't. Most people won't know what that is, Ma. So would you like to explain what the Stetson is?
The cowboy hat, the Stetson cowboy hat. It's a tank. The legit cowboy hat that one of you guys got Dad. So Kenny, when I sent the keg stand, he said, "Why did Dad wear the Stetson? Or why isn't Dad wearing the Stetson?" I guess he saw him in the picture. I said it fell off when he was upside down.
Yeah, Kenny paid just so not to give away how much that Stetson cost, but you could have bought a 360 or a Xbox One with one of those.
Yeah,
that thing was expensive. But
the legitimate ones. That's why I said we have to move to Tennessee so Dad can wear a Stetson.
All Dad needs is the spurred boots too. Dad just needs
boots,
spurred boots.
You can walk around in a Stetson and people don't look at you like you're weird.
Yeah. Were you drinking at all with the fraternity or no?
I had the beer. I want a red cup. It says college. I need a red cup. Dad doesn't care.
Yeah.
So the beer was pretty good. Michael got it for me out of the keg. He kept saying it's IPA. I don't even know what that means. It's IPA beer.
IPA, I believe. Ready? This is how little I know. If any of my friends are watching this who does drink, I believe an IPA is like a specific beer that's not like a not a main company. So like
like a generic beer I drank.
Yeah, like generic would be like your Bud Light, Coors.
Yeah.
An IPA is like it's a higher end beer, I believe.
Oh, it is. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's higher end. Yeah,
it was good. It wasn't it wasn't like overly frothy. It wasn't anything. So yeah, because it came out of the keg and kept saying it's an IPA. I said, well, I don't care. I'm not picky.
Usually there's like a flavor to them as well. Like sometimes like they'll do some wacky flavors, like a raspberry beer. Those are pretty good. And usually they have higher alcohol percentages, but like slightly.
This one didn't appear to be flavored other than beer flavor, but they had seltzers too, like flavored seltzers.
Mom was doing White Claws? Mom with two White Claws.
I thought about it at first because, like I said, we had just eaten. I'm like, do I want to put a beer down? Usually I like a beer with a hamburger or hot dog, like that kind of event type of beer. But we had just eaten. So I looked at the seltzers. I said, do I want a canned seltzer? Yeah. But in the spirit of parent weekend with kegs, I said, I'll take a red cup.
Whatever's the kid. Yeah, Kenny and I talked about this somewhat recently, but like when I'm eating something, the last thing I want is a beer. I think that's just how I'm wired. Like I'll never understand people that are like that'll eat wings and be like, I need a beer with this.
Yeah, it depends on what. Well, I never need a beer, but certain food to drink with a beer is like a hamburger or a hot dog type of thing. I'm not one to have a beer with my, steak dinner or going out to eat. Like to your point, I don't have to have a beer when I go out for wings or something like that, or pizza.
How'd Dad do at the fraternity? Was he like getting with the dad? Like I always wonder because Dad was probably the only non-drinker there. How's Dad with everyone?
He had not seen. Well, first of all, he never saw Mike's apartment. I forgot that.
Oh, that's right.
So he didn't even know where to go past the old place to get to Mike's place, and so yeah, he was first taking all that in, and then the fraternity. I mean, he's seen it, but he never had the full tour. Dad only went into Mike's room and saw the bathroom, obviously, and that was enough for him to get the hell out of there screaming.
Oh,
So
in the
this
in the
time,
fraternity.
the fraternity. So he said, "Give me a tour." I said, "Yeah, let's see the fraternity." So Mike took us throughout and looked at the kitchen. And as I said, they did a great job of cleaning compared to the last time I was in that place. So Dad walked around. He took some videos for his friends because he just was shocked that.
Yeah. Did Michael show Dad the dungeon in the basement, or did you guys do a full tour?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Well, like I said, they were using the basement for the disco, so there were some loud people in there dancing with the DJ, and then he had never seen upstairs. They have a pool table there. I didn't know that. Mike's never really.
Yeah,
used the pool
there's
table.
a pool table in that center room on the first floor. Yeah.
Behind the TV, and yeah, I mean, like it was nice to see clean, but it's never gonna be what anybody would call.
Yeah, it's such a
healthy.
shame because I think we've talked about it when Mike first moved like a year or two ago on the podcast. But that house itself is gorgeous. Like it's like a mansion, and it got cut apart into like dorms for the fraternity, and they just absolutely ruined that place.
Yeah.
But I think most
Heyday
fraternities are
was
like
probably-
that.
Right, in its heyday, it was probably a very nice house, but it's not nice now, and I
Right.
don't know that you could bring it back up to stuff. Mike said it's listed on Zillow for something like $5 million for somebody to buy it, because they're desperate to get somebody to take it over. But you'd have to put so much money in it to fix it up, to bring it up
Yeah.
to standards, because it's just that.
You would have to
It's
gut that
worth it.
whole house. You'd have to gut that whole
Yeah,
house.
you would. The bathrooms are just, I mean, it's unbelievable. You wouldn't even bother redoing them. That's why it's got to be somebody who wants to put money into it and have somebody better running it, because apparently the guy running it there's been a lot of issues with him.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say.
It's
The
gotta
management
be. It's
company.
gotta be. The only person that's gonna buy it is a alumni from the fraternity who like wants to bring it back to life. That's really it. No one else is gonna want to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, because the pit is kind of nice. It's a good hang place, because we were driving by some of the quote unquote nicer fraternities. Some of them are pathetic in the sense that they're right smack in the middle. Like there's a classroom here and an admin building, and then there's a fraternity in the middle. I like it better when it's a whole area of fraternities. When they're
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you have them separated from the campus, and they're all lined up one after the other. Some of them opted to go into the university because it's easier to get the classes and
Right.
stuff. But those they may be nicer, but to me it doesn't really have that fraternity feel. However, they were all out in the front lawn because they don't have the pit. These places don't have that option. So that's the only nice part about Mike's, is they have that special area to do things.
Right.
But
You know what Kenny and I did last night? Kenny and I watched the F1 races. That didn't end
Oh, right,
until 3 a.m. So Kenny and I were up pretty late. But as you know, I'm learning about the sport. I won't say why on the until Uncle gives me the okay. I won't talk about why. But I learned so much last night just from Kenny explaining stuff to me. But also I didn't realize, but on the first turn, Mother, a lot of the time there's a huge crash, and luckily no one gets injured, obviously. But they have to reset the race. Like they start over. Takes like an hour to reset. It was so long. So Kenny and I are just waiting, like, when is this gonna start? So luckily we watched all 53 laps. It was really interesting to watch.
Van something or other won. The main people, Van.
Yeah,
What are they called? Van.
Well, Max Verstappen
Van
won
Houten?
is what you mean, but
Thank you.
yeah, Max Verstappen. I knew he was dominant. Like he's like I don't want to say Jordan. He's more like the LeBron of racing right now. And I mean, Mom, like he's beating people by 20 seconds. 20 seconds is like a ridiculous time.
Right.
Like that's what I mean.
They took first and second.
Yeah,
I
they
think
did
took
incredibly
first
well.
and second, I think. Yeah, it was good.
Well, I just want to change my brightness again. But yeah, so we stayed up watching that for pretty till 3 a.m. with Matt Sprague. I'm pretty sure Matt Sprague fell asleep halfway through. But it was really interesting to watch. I learned a lot from Kenny, and like Kenny really does know his stuff when it comes to that. So,
Yeah, he's been doing a lot of research on it, which is good.
yeah. So
Good to know.
yeah, and then the only thing I didn't like about it, and something that they have to kind of, I don't know, revamp is the right word, but like because every week there's a winner, if that makes sense, and they do a celebration, they do the award ceremony. Yeah. It's almost like they're not excited to win. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
No,
it felt
I
very.
didn't realize there were so many races.
Yeah, and you got a huge trophy every time. So after your 20th trophy, like Max Verstappen, he probably just wants his trophy and go home. Like I don't even think he wants to get up there anymore.
Like I said, it takes kind of the allure out of it. I thought the F1 was a once a year, almost like a FIFA type thing, and it's not. It's a business, and it's like a business, a competition amongst 20 people that run the same race or the same type of. I mean, I'm ignorant of the sport. I've only seen a couple races, but I've learned a lot also, and I'm still boggled by it.
But when you
I can't get my hands around the sport.
I didn't understand like the excitement in the sense of, isn't it just guys going around a track? And I'm sure our F1 fans are like, what the hell? But once you see someone like try and do a take or attempt to take a take and they can't do it, like to get around a guy like that, it gets exciting. Yeah. You're like, oh wow, like that was actually really impressive. Not to mention the camera doesn't do it justice, but they're going like 110 on turns.
You also take for granted the pit crews. They make one slight error, and that's time. They have that down to a science.
Well,
it's
fun
to watch.
I said last night while we were watching, there's a guy that has to like stand in front and pick up the nose so that they can get the wheels off and on in a second or whatever. Yep. But I was like, the scariest job in there is the guy that has to stand in front of the car as it's coming at him in the pit. Yeah. I was thinking about that. I was like, I'd be like jumping backwards, So
you got to really trust the driver. You got to trust everybody's playing. It's literally a team. Everybody has to play their role, and if one person screws up, you lost time. You could lose the race over it.
I also didn't realize how many people were on a team. I figured like pit crew, couple coaches, blah blah blah. Like how big's an NFL team? Let's say 150 people maybe. And again, I could be way off on that. I'm just thinking like who's on the field, blah blah blah. Right? I think it's 50 players plus teams, whatever, like coaches, blah blah blah. Alpine has 1,400 employees, like part of the team. Like that's a huge. That's one team. Alpine's one of the teams. So and every team has 2 cars and blah blah blah. But I was like, wow, I did not realize how much money is in this sport. Like I knew there was money, I didn't realize like that. Yeah.
Yeah, each car is a small business, a small industry, or not even small. Big revenue generator and pays a lot of salaries, but it's definitely worth it. I mean, they often compare it to horse racing. Similar situation where you see the same horses run certain derbies, but there are more horses than just like 20 from what I know. I mean,
I know nothing. I'd have to ask Uncle Jerry. I know nothing about horse racing.
There are some similarities between that. Oh shoot! I got my buddy here. He's had Bobo's the one that really took a lot because he's not used to the long car ride, and Chris, the way Mike's place is set up, he was kind of trapped in that little
he doesn't
landing, if you will, because that's where Mike put the TV and a sofa. So we didn't use downstairs very much, and while Michaela was watching him, she kept sending Mike videos of Bo, and all he did was cry at the window.
Aww.
So the only time he stopped was when I was petting him on the sofa. So anyhow, if he starts barking, I'll take him upstairs. Dad's out washing the car. Dad's got to leave tomorrow for his business trip.
Right, Dad's going down to see Kenny.
Visiting and then Tampa and all that stuff. So he wanted to get home somewhat early just to unwind from last night sleeping on a mattress.
Kenny was sending me videos of Missy Buns last night. And you could tell she's getting tired because she starts doing the biscuits. She's like saying, it's time for bed.
You ready to start?
Well, I think we should start instantaneously with your experience this week with the 4.3 magnitude, 4.8 magnitude earthquake in New Jersey. Thank
Yes.
God I got out of there while I could.
Well, let me just say for all your podcast people who know him, Bill Brother was the epicenter of this
Yeah.
hurricane, of this earthquake.
Mr.
And,
G.
naturally, the first thing he worried about was his cars. He's like, check the cars, make sure they're okay. Yeah, it was out there in Tewksbury. And 4.8. I was here with the dog, and for people who don't know our house, we have a highway near us, we have a small airport near us, and I was on the phone with my sister, and I was upstairs on the second floor, and it sounded as though it was a growing, rolling thunder. Sounded as if a truck was going, because we had a car, a small truck, SUV, explode on the highway over the summer. Remember that, Chris?
Yeah. I didn't feel it. Remember, I slept through it.
Oh, that's right. It was a loud boom, and you heard it, and we all went, what? So now I heard like a rumbling, and I thought, oh man, is another truck blowing up? But it kept growing and growing. It sounded as though trucks were coming off the highway, falling off the highway and heading towards our houses, like multiple trucks.
Really?
And then it got really, really loud, and all of a sudden I saw the furniture in our room start to shake. We have this giant armoire. So it's happening in front of me with this loud noise, and I'm poor Aunt Sue, I'm doing the like, what the hell? What the hell?
Aunt Sue told me you used other words besides what the hell.
Yes, there's a lot of holy shit going on. And the dog was running in a circle only because I thought, well, that can't be a truck. It's got to be an airplane hitting our house or something. So I immediately ran out of the room looking for damage, tree down, something. And there was nothing. Literally, Kenny texted me and said, Uncle Ray said you just had an earthquake in New Jersey. Like, all right, earthquake makes sense.
Yeah.
So, it was a big deal. The funny part was all the reporting right away was, New Jersey. In about an hour, was all about New York.
Yeah, and
all the
Massachusetts.
problems with New York. Yeah, because, well, New York, they give New Jersey no credit. They act like they suffered the most, and meanwhile, our friends were literally in the epicenter. So about. What was it, around 4 o'clock later on? Again, I'm on the phone with Mrs. Greta, and she starts freaking out because there was another one, an aftershock. That was a 4.0 near Peapack Gladstone, which is very close to us also. So that wasn't as bad, but it was another ba-boom, like a big thundering sound.
Friends,
not as much of the shaking.
Our friends down in South Jersey, we call them the Italians. That's like the other half of the Discord. They're down in like that Cherry Point sort of area, and they said they got a really bad aftershock afterwards. So they were like, oh my God, had to like move stuff because their house was shaking so much, or apartment. I don't know if they're.
Well, it was going along the Ramapo fault line. So it extended from Washington, D.C., then it headed up Philly to New York, to New Jersey, New York, and then all the way up towards Maine. So it actually kind of reverberated all the way down the fault line from the epicenter of the central Jersey area. This was the strongest one since 1884 in our area on that particular fault line. There were possible aftershocks. I told you we had that 4.0 one, but I looked it up just to see because I had to go out around like a little bit after the first one, and I want to leave the dog, so I double checked to see what the story was. There's a 6% chance you're going to have another earthquake of that size, and that's based on California. So I said, okay, I'm probably good. I went out and
we'll play our odds.
That second one. Yeah. Well, 94% chance you're not going to have one. So I'm like, yeah, you're fine, Bo. I ran out. Little do I know, a couple hours later, I was back and with the dog, but boom, it happened again. So anyhow, you can have aftershocks hours later, days, weeks, months later even. So we survived. I have to add one of those T-shirts that said "I survived."
I saw that. I think Mrs. Greta posted that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I've yet to really experience an earthquake yet. So
we don't think of that first in this area. I guess it's commonplace. Now, Mrs. Greta, she's been through them in California. She said this one was worse, but she was right in the center of it. So. They're used to that out there. Not used to it saying they don't get scared, but at least you know what to expect. For me, I'm like, I'm going through the whole routine in a matter of seconds. Is this a truck? Is this a train?
Right.
Is this a plane? A tree? What the hell's going on here?
Yeah.
You don't think earthquake, but.
Yeah, you think worst case. Speaking of airplanes, did you see that Boeing's just taken L after L? Boeing just had like another plane, like the turbine just fell apart, like mid takeoff. Yeah. Boeing. I don't know what's going on over there, but yeah, they got to figure something out. They're either cutting corners or something or whatever.
Well, I believe that man who did not commit suicide or allegedly committed suicide was saying that it was more the part supplier that they were using.
Mom, you got
That's
something
why
on
he
your lip?
said- Oh,
There you go.
that was
Yeah.
that was a part supplier that was giving them question like they were buying cheap and repairing these airplanes with cheap
Right.
parts. That's what he was alleging. So I don't know, but sounds to me like could be an issue.
Yeah. But I'm glad we survived the earthquake. Again, there's not much news to this. I know this is like big news to us, but other people are like, okay, it's just an earthquake. And it's not like, especially since Taiwan had that earthquake that was like a 7.8 and it like destroyed the city.
Yeah, well, I mean, as much as, hey, there was, as far as we know, there was no major damage or anything. We're really lucky considering this is a highly populated area, densely populated area. And nothing major, no outages or anything. But then, you really wonder for these people that have a 7.6.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we could handle that in this area if that ever happened with the number of people that live in this portion of the country.
Yeah, I always wonder what the difference between like a 4.8 and a 4.9 is, or like a 4.8 and a 5.2. I wonder if it's like at what point is our buildings just collapsing? Clearly, it's above a 7, but
Well, at 7.8, you saw what happened to the buildings over
Yeah.
there. That's enough to knock buildings down. Some people in the city areas, like heading Newark, that area, I think it was that area, they couldn't go back into the buildings until they were checked.
right.
Because you don't want to be inside when that happens, if you're in a building.
Yeah.
You don't want things falling on you either, but you're better off getting away from any tall structures. So, it's just, I couldn't fathom something like that. You definitely got to have destruction if you're above it. I will say this, the 4 wasn't as bad because it was more of like an explosion sound versus the 4.8, which lasted longer and seemed to rumble even more. But I was on a lower level, so that might have made a difference too.
I saw a video of in China, there was a skyscraper of apartments. It fits like 20,000 families. It's massive. It's made of glass. It has its own like barber shop. It has its own shopping mall at the bottom. It's huge. But I was thinking like, man, if one earthquake were to hit that, like right underneath, even if it wasn't a giant magnitude one, like that's crazy to me. That would be wild.
That's a very densely populated country, and they're crammed in these cities and these high rises. So yeah, as bad as it's in some of these other places like New York, you can only imagine one building holding 20,000 people.
I know, but
what I don't understand is how come they didn't know about it, in the sense that it seems like there's all these different geological organizations and universities that are constantly tracking these things. And I know they do tsunami warnings. How did they not know? And I haven't read a lot about it. I've been busy, but how did they not know about the Ramapo fault line acting up?
Yeah,
I was surprised about
I
that.
see. I would have thought that maybe it's because they're like, it's the mentality of like, what are the odds there's going to be an earthquake? So let's move our resources to somewhere where it's more likely, right? Oh, I don't know how it works.
They have one right at Fordham University in the Bronx. There was
Oh, really?
a structure there, a seismology thing. It just looks like a cube, stone cube building. It's not very large. And you walk past it all the time and says, yeah, it's seismology. I think it does earthquakes or something. Okay. Did it pick it up? I'm wondering.
Yeah.
But and that's not the only university in this area.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we don't have any more aftershocks. But now we're prepared for if there is an aftershock within the month. Yeah. Get the deck, go under the.
Yeah. Well, I'd just like to point out, always when Dad's away.
Yeah, always when Dad's not home. Whether it's a terrible snowstorm, earthquakes. I'm just waiting for a tsunami. That's the last thing that we need. Yeah. All right. Well, besides that, I mean, I don't even know where to start today because. Oh, how about we start off with something a little funny, Mom? Did you see this? UFC fighter accidentally knocks herself out. Now, this is a tough video to watch.
Oh.
Now, clearly, I don't know what
man.
this is. I think you're gonna like this one. I don't know what UFC this is, like what company. Like it's obviously
does not look like an even match.
It is not.
I'm
Ready?
sorry, that does not look like an even match.
Watch this. This is going viral. Ready? Knocked herself out.
Oh my god.
I was like, oh man, that's embarrassing.
I don't understand, why are these two fighting? Don't they do it based on weight class or
Yeah.
something?
What are you trying to say, Mom?
Nothing. Just pointing out.
No, yeah, you're right. But I don't know what this is. I can't see it. Dead Face or something like that. I don't know what. That's just some no-name company, I guess. So they have different rules
Okay.
than. I shouldn't say no-name company. It's a specific division, so they don't have the weight clause
Right.
stuff. But
Oh, okay. So it's anything goes, obviously.
Yeah.
You can even knock yourself out if you want to. Okay.
technically you could do that in any division. But all right. Besides that little, just a palate cleanser. Want to start with this one? Oregon's Democratic governor signs bill recriminalizing hard drugs after.
Yes, guess what? Liberal cities are now starting to realize, maybe it wasn't a good idea to legalize these heavy duty drugs.
Yeah.
So, recent record number of deaths takes its effect. So in September, they're reversing a measure 110 it was, or 220 from a 220 law. So 58% of the people approved the initial measure. Now, if the aftermath of all the death and the crime going on, 56% said no more. So the Oregon governor had to reverse their anything goes law.
Yeah.
And now the ruling is personal use possession is a misdemeanor. You're going to get 6 months in jail. They're going to crack down on use on the sidewalks and the paths. But you can also, instead of it being a criminal penalties, you could do treatment, like some sort of treatment to attempt to fix the problem.
Yeah.
So, but the point is, Oregon was the mothership of anything goes, and they've learned their lesson. Exactly what a lot of other places have said. Once you do this, you bring crime, overdose, drugs, and you wind up, then you wind up taxing it just to pay for treatment programs. It's like
it's a money scheme. There's a purpose for it.
Hey, and you're going in a circle and you're achieving nothing. You're creating a problem where there wasn't a problem. So hopefully, it gets it off the streets. It gets more people into treatment programs and criminalizes it. Maybe they learned a lesson.
There was a video a couple months ago of a guy that was on, I don't know what like the main street is in Oregon, but is it Oregon or Oregon? I say Oregon, but I hesitate.
Oregon, but
Oregon.
Seattle's the capital.
Yeah.
Seattle, Oregon.
I guess it was Seattle. And basically, like, you're looking at it, and I, honest to God, in the video, thought it was like a third world country. I did not realize that was in America. And this guy, it's just a whole thing of like people who are homeless, have drug problems, blah, blah, blah. Right. And they asked the guy, like, how fast can you get drugs? And the guy goes, give me 1 sec. And he turns to the... Like, he goes around the corner and brings back, like, clearly hard drugs. But, yeah, this is... Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I knew I was wrong when I said it. It's Seattle, Washington. Portland, Oregon.
Portland. Yeah.
My bad.
It's okay. We're both tired. I'm exhausted. Mom's been partying.
Seattle, Oregon. That doesn't sound right. Seattle's Washington.
I didn't think it sounded right either, but I was like, Mom's always right.
I have to correct myself.
Yeah.
So, drugs everywhere. You got them in a second, right?
Yeah, I don't know why we ever thought that it was a good idea to decriminalize hard drugs. Like, the problem is, I think, let's say they reverse this. They're going to say, oh, it's not the hard drugs, it's the fentanyl. Well, where does the fentanyl come from? Well, the border, right? So it's a trickle system there. But it's the one thing I disagree with Joe Rogan on. Well, I disagree with a couple things, but he's always like, he's pro legalizing drugs because of the idea of, well, a lot of people become very creative off of drugs. And it's like, I sometimes I feel like that's the same like, I know a lot of people that do hard drugs in the sense of, I've never seen one be better from hard drugs. There's very few. I think that's the same argument as when people say, oh, I don't have to go to college because Bill Gates didn't. I think that's the same concept. Right. So that's why when it comes to decriminalizing drugs, I don't think that's a good idea. I never thought that was a good idea. And this proves it.
I think there's a difference between, I don't think Joe Rogan would say that he's addicted to the drugs that he takes. Like, he could go a day without it. He doesn't understand that some people get addicted to some of these drugs. Some of them are made to be addictive drugs. And it's not, they just can't physically get off it.
I'm sure Joe Rogan, he knows everyone, so I'm sure he does understand that. But I don't, like, I think for him, he talks about the creativity he gets from marijuana, which is fine. I knew some kids in college were huge marijuana heads who got straight A's. But then I also know more marijuana kids who were just the biggest, like, I don't want to say losers, but they never did anything with their lives, To this day, they're still kind of like that. So,
I don't. I will say from what I have read, there's a difference between marijuanas. The
Yeah.
marijuana of today is very different, and that's scientific. I'm not saying it as a parent. It's a very different chemistry than it was, say, when I was younger.
Yeah.
And probably when you were in school, it's changed too. So I don't think you can make the comparisons. There's a lot of stupid people say, oh, we had all the time in college. It was no big deal. It's different now. And I
Yeah.
think it's highly addictive. And you're seeing more and more cases of mental health issues being triggered by it because of the chemicals that are in it. So I just think it's naive when people say, "Oh, it's not that big a deal. It's
Right.
no worse than a cigarette." Yeah, maybe years ago, 60s and 70s, 80s. I don't think that's true anymore.
I would say I think it's the opposite. I think it's safer now than ever. But again, I don't see like that idea that someone's more. Again, I think that's more of the person. Like if you have someone that can do that, get straight A's, be the most creative person, then fine, do what you're doing. But I know more people who have that's become their identity rather than actually improving their life. So that's where I go. That's where it's tough for me to agree with Rogan because Rogan's friend group, from what I've seen on of course I don't know him, but he's with people that are high level people who have accomplished a lot of things. I don't know anyone who's accomplished as much as the guys that Rogan has had on smoking marijuana or doing whatever. I'm
Right.
sure they're out there, but I would love to see what the sample size is. As I said, I think that's kind of like when people say, oh, I don't have to go to college because Steve Jobs didn't go to college and look how successful he was, right? I think these are small sample sizes.
Right, but there's also a difference between a pothead and a person who smokes marijuana.
True.
Some people can smoke marijuana and they don't wake up the next morning saying, I can't get through the day without a hit.
Yeah.
I'm guessing Joe Rogan's one of those people because he has other physical outlets. He doesn't rely just on that, and he appears to be somebody disciplined over his well-being, just like, many of his guests. They're not necessarily potheads. Some of them are, or an admitted ex-drug users, right?
Yeah.
So, everybody's different. I don't think that it's the same marijuana. I think you can get different kinds of marijuana for people who are in that economic class, who could be very selective and get certain types that appeal to certain senses, because now it's such a it's an industry, right? It's the cannabis industry and the marijuana industry. In the old days, you got whatever was on the street or whatever everybody was selling, and everybody used the same thing. Nowadays, I think it's very different, and it's very. I don't think it's a wise thing to say, "Oh, it should be legal for everybody."
Right.
I just don't think that's
marijuana
the case.
is not considered a hard drug anymore, right? So think about that. We're debating a quote unquote soft drug. Like, there's no way in hell cocaine, heroin, whatever is good for you in any facet. That's the part where I'm completely on the opposite spectrum of
The
like a
only
Rogan.
thing I will say is, and I disagree because of the studies that I have seen, and we do need more research. Time and time again, when they interview hardened criminals, so many of the final straw that got them into prison, whether they murdered somebody, robbed somebody, it always started with marijuana that day. Something always triggered them. Not to say they didn't go into other drugs, but there's something about the current marijuana that's
You're talking
triggering
marijuana.
responses in individuals that really we do need to research it because we need to publish these studies.
Right.
Because unfortunately, the information I don't think is getting out and it's not being properly studied because nobody wants to admit that there's something not good about this stuff.
I don't think so. What I was saying, I believe the law says that marijuana is not considered a hard drug anymore. I don't consider it a hard drug, but that's an opinion. I don't believe that marijuana is considered a hard drug anymore. But like as I said, when it comes to cocaine, I think methamphetamines are used in the medical industry now. But
You can't, based on this article, nobody's going to say marijuana is a hard drug. They're trying to tell you the fentanyl is not bad. Look at what they just did in Oregon. They just finally realized, oh, we made a mistake. This stuff is bad. They were trying to tell you that live and let live and everybody's fine.
yeah, but
and nobody's getting
fentanyl
hurt.
itself, though, fentanyl is used in a lot of medicines, right? It's high dosages of fentanyl that kills you. And by high dosages, that's like this much. That's how much it takes to kill you. But fentanyl is, again, all these drugs have certain properties that are used in medicines, but it's not the same stuff as what you're getting on the street, right?
Right.
So-
Same thing with opiates, right?
Yeah.
Percocet was perfectly fine until people got addicted. And then when the doctors cut off the prescriptions, people had to go to street street opiums, or
Yeah.
street heroines and whatnot, and you wind up getting a whole class of people addicted to these drugs that because they started
Yeah.
with something medicinal and it just got worse.
Well,
But
there's a famous documentary. It's actually worth a watch. I wish I knew what it was called, but it's on Netflix. It talks about the opiate crisis and literally how the pharmaceutical company like absolutely took advantage of
yeah,
the
they
drug
lost the
market.
lawsuit.
Yeah,
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 they lost in court and had to be, it was a family. It's a family-owned pharmaceutical company. I forget
yeah,
which one of the major ones. And yeah, they lost in court and had to pay out billions of dollars in payments to people who I don't know if they paid it to companies that they didn't give the information to. I can't remember the final outcome. I don't know if it went to actual individuals who brought the lawsuits against the company, but yeah. So, but that was another one. Nobody said boo. They just push it, push it, push it. And as we're learning, the pharmaceutical industry is going to be taking a hit in the years ahead, I think. I think people are really starting to question. They took it too far. The opium issue started it, the Percocets and all that stuff. And, with what we've seen within the last 4 years, it just went into overdrive. And I think people are really pushing back now and saying, hey, wait a minute. And then once again, I come back to our story. All these cities that said, you know what, live and let live, and we'll tax
yeah.
it, and it won't be a problem. Now they've come to find out it's a huge problem because not everybody is like a Joe Rogan. Most people can't handle that.
Exactly.
Bodies can't handle it. And by the way, we've had an explosion in depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, autism, and nobody's really looking into the causes of it or willing to say what the causes of it is, of many of these things. To that, you're going to add
Hard drugs.
legalized drugs.
Yeah, legalize. And again, it's not just like marijuana. We're talking heroin,
Yeah,
methamphetamines, crystal meth, cocaine,
yeah,
like stuff like that, which is pretty
yes.
wild. Yeah. Isn't it
And my
wild that the government will sell
generation,
that? They're just like,
right, and
here's the
my
drug.
generation and the college age generation, as far as I know, nobody suffered, or the number of people suffering depression, we didn't have that. It wasn't talked about to begin with, but people weren't popping pills for autism, ADD, ADHD, every alphabet thing under the book when you went to school. Maybe one kid had drugs. That's all you knew about.
Right.
Nowadays, it's just commonplace, and it starts when they're young. And, people are depressed now. Every other commercial. If your depression medicine doesn't work, take another medication. Add to that illegal drugs that I'm sure have some sort of effect on mental
Yeah,
functioning.
sure.
Add that to some high level drugs that people are already taking. It's a very bad combination. So, what do we think was going to happen if you're going to legalize stuff for people who are already on medications that are
Yeah.
mind altering to some extent?
Yeah. Well, the ADD medicine is what kind of I feel like got super out of hand. Like every kid I knew in college was on some ADD medicine, and I was like, "How many of you guys actually need this?"
Yeah.
Right? And it was just that easy to get, not high dosages,
Well,
but they would
and
be
how
popping
many of them
multiple.
know, including parents who were never told, um, what these drugs actually do?
Yeah.
And you trying to weigh the benefit versus sometimes the cure is worse than the disease, although nobody wanted to believe that. And there's a woman in Connecticut, she's actually John Kerry's cousin, as in John Kerry, the big guy going around complaining about climate change around the world. She's exposing quite a bit of what goes on in public schools with the pharmaceutical industry. They're right in there. She calls it like the pharmacies in these schools. And they will force you to put your kids on something. And she's been fighting this for years now. And she's finally getting some traction to say, this is getting ridiculous. These pharmaceuticals own these schools. And nobody is doing any sort of due diligence with these kids. It's
Right.
like an automatic, here's your prescription. Go down and fill it at the nurse's office. I didn't realize where it was at, and it's interesting to see. I'd like to hear more from her about what she's been researching this for years, and many of her friends, she's high income area, many people have experienced this, and the threat of, if you don't do this, you're gonna have to pull your kid out of the school
Right.
and put them in a private school.
That's ridiculous.
So, yeah.
Yeah. But I just remember kids that in college that were taking ADD medicine and they didn't need it, and literally they would just take it to clean their room. That's the lack of motivation they had. They couldn't even clean their room without ADD medicine. So that's what I mean. Like, there's people that do drugs that are just deadbeats. They're not going to do anything with it, right?
Well, but this is the culture, and we took it to a level, like I said, ADD medicine is nothing compared to what
Right.
people are doing out on the streets. And that's wrong. It is something. And that's part of the problem. It has become so mainstream that everybody treats it like it's, well, I'm oversimplifying, but it's becoming like an over-the-counter drug, like an Advil or whatever. Every other person's kid might be on something similar to that.
Right.
And when we've become such a medicated society, that I used to be judgmental of parents, and now hearing from this woman, I understand they really have, parents over the barrel. What are you supposed to do? If you don't put your kid on this, you're not going to this school, a
Right.
public school. What's a parent supposed to do? And that's a horrible situation. And I hope somebody really investigates this and they start taking it very seriously. There's a whole generation of kids that, and then we should be surprised when Oregon realizes, not a good idea that we had people
Yeah.
just doing any
Probably.
drug.
Maybe we should look at our streets and go, why are there 1,000 homeless people on one boulevard?
Right.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of which, I don't know why. I guess these don't really correlate, but let's talk about your Wisconsin voters approved measures that will change the way the elections are run in the battleground states. Well,
Okay, so
specifically
it's
state.
very big, and right now there's something going on in Louisiana. I'm sorry, is it Louisiana?
You
or
keep
Nevada?
talking, Mom. I'm just gonna go get water. Continue.
Okay, so this is an interesting story because this goes back to what everyone called the Zucker Bucks. So in the 2020 election, there was a lot of private financing that went in to elections to supplement what the government pays, and mostly to register people to vote. And where people had a problem with, say, Mark Zuckerberg, he had an organization that he funded that was working to get people registered to vote. Problem is, the group was focusing in Democratic areas, and that's not really what you're supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be, if you're going to do it, it has to be, no bias and just registering people to vote and allowing them to vote however they want to vote. But when you're just going into certain areas, obviously you're building up a voter base of Democrats. And then meanwhile, you're underfunding other areas that might be more Republican. And that is technically not allowed. So Wisconsin voters, they supported a state constitutional amendment saying no more private donations to fund the administrative side of elections. So anyone other than somebody who's involved in election work, no election officials can perform these
Right.
type of duties. So it's just a way to keep it unbiased. And this is big because a lot of private funding goes into our elections. It's shocking the amount of money that goes into it. And this ridiculous claim of, and that's been the answer to those who don't support this measure. Oh, well, now elections are going to suffer because it's going to be underfunded. How are we
Right.
going to be able to run elections?
Which is such it's a bad argument because we know how much money goes into this. So the fact that you can't reallocate some of the funds to something else, it just goes to show you, again, no matter how you feel about election fraud in the last election, it's kind of weird how the argument for trying to make the elections safer, if anyone's trying to argue against safe elections or safer elections, you got to question their morals there. Why would you not want to put more money into safer elections? Right.
Yeah.
So that's where I go. What are you trying to defend here? Are you trying to tell us there's no money? We just gave 1.2 trillion or whatever I forget what we just put 1.2 trillion into. But there's money. Money's not the issue when it comes to these voting machines and voting processes, right? Okay, so you have to pay a couple people a little more. It's when one of them, when these senators and congressmen, whatever, are against strengthening our voting system, that's where you look at them and go, oh, you're owned by somebody, right?
Yeah. I'm just totally shocked that a nation that runs $1 trillion in deficits every 100 days can't fund elections without private dollars going in. That's malarkey, okay? And if we're that bad, and guess what? For all the money that gets dumped in, we've gone from one day of elections to now it takes 2 weeks to finish an election to actually find out who won. We're going backwards, and the American people aren't stupid.
Not to mention we're outsourcing our voting, right, with the machines. right?
Exactly.
So what are we talking about here? Where's our money going? If that's not the
Exactly.
biggest eye opener for people, I don't know what is. Again, however you feel about election fraud, like whether it happened or not, that's not really the issue here. But I will say that if you don't see our our congressman, if you will, saying, I don't want to put more money into safer elections. I mean, you gotta look at them and be like, what are you doing here? You know, like, who, someone owns you, and it's not someone in this country.
The semantics of it is we want more people to vote. We got to get
Right.
people to vote. Got to get them out there. Okay, that is true. You want to encourage citizens to vote. And there's always been an effort, especially in universities, because a lot of traditionally young individuals just turn 18, 19, 20. You want them to vote. You want them to have a voice. Okay, so now they put private dollars into going into these universities. That's great. But if you look at it, so much, what is it, like 99% of the administrative staffs in most universities is Democratic.
Mm-hmm.
They come into these universities, they pump private money in. Now they're paying students at universities to register voters, and there's a slant there. You know, they tend to be Democratic. Once you put private money in, now you can direct it to where you want to go. And they're finally, a state like Wisconsin is saying, you know what, no more of that. You can't control it. We learned from the last election. You put private funds in, who's controlling where they're doing the registering, right? So likewise, when you hear these initiatives by the Biden administration, oh, guess what? We're going to start registering voters in prisons and at the DMV. Okay, what do you have in prisons and at the DMV? Is anybody verifying who they are? No, you just right now go vote, 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 vote. Same thing in prison.
Yeah,
vote. You got to vote.
If they can't manipulate machines, they're manipulating in another way. Right, that's really what it comes down to.
And we've learned, for those of us who see some of these cases and have seen some of the evidence of what went on in some of these states. We just learned last week in Georgia, there was zero signature verification in one of the counties, Fulton County, the biggest one in Georgia.
It's almost 4 years later, so right?
Zero. Not like, oh, it was weak and therefore there was fraud. The person who ran and one of the election officials came out and said, I will tell you, in court, he said, there was zero signature verification. So, you know, how can no one say that, well, that's not fraud? That's not fraud. There's so much fraud that could go into that when they're not even checking signatures. So anyhow, initiatives like this, where they're saying,
can I pause you for a second, Mom? It's not so much the fact that, again, we can go based on evidence and what you and I believe, but let's say you don't believe that there was voter fraud. That's fine. But you have to admit that there's too many openings to allow potential tampering. And that's where I lose or where I feel like people lose that argument of, is there fraud or not? The fact that you have that opening of finding out 3 years later that these people weren't doing signatures and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's got to be an eye opener to a lot of people. Like, that's why it's so hard to have a conversation with someone who believes that there's no voter fraud possible. Again, if you don't believe there's voter fraud, that's one thing. But if you can't look at the openings that the system gives for tampering, that's when you got to kind of reevaluate, or that tells me you have a lack of information, right?
Yes.
So.
Well, it happened to be the Republican Party that was squawking about it because that's the president that lost. Prior to 2020 election, there were Democrats who came out and said, you can't do mail-in ballots. Yeah. It's loaded with
doesn't make sense.
Potential fraud.
But COVID, Mom, they had to do mail-ins.
Right. And it was COVID. Let's look at the positive. It was an opportunity to see, all right, we did the mail-in ballots. It's turning out that it was a disaster. It's proving the point that Democrats had made. They just don't want to admit it now because their team won. Now, more Republicans are saying, all right, if this is the game, mail-in ballots, get your ballot, vote early, blah, 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 blah. If that does pan out, I'm making a prediction. The first ones to scream about mail-in ballots, if the Republican wins, will be the Democrats. They're loaded with fraud. We can't have this. We can't have mail-in ballots. This is what I'm saying. It's both parties knew before the 2020 election. You're always going to have fraud. Everybody admits that. We've always had fraud, even from the first time our country started. You always will have. You can't have 100% secure. But when you introduce mail-in ballots, and now going forward, we know there are 10 million people in this country who are not currently citizens. Okay? That, and now you're throwing ballots out there that anybody could take. And then you take one county like Georgia that said, we didn't verify any signatures. How are you not going to have even more fraud than what we thought was acceptable before? So, like I said, it's the hypocrisy of the political environment. When the other side feels the pain, all of a sudden you're going to hear how terrible these mail-in ballots are. And for anybody, Democrat, Republican, we had the exercise. We saw what happened with a pandemic, if you will, and how all the laws that existed were thrown out the window. And many states enshrine those laws. Unfortunately, a state like Wisconsin, they had their fair share of fraud that was disclosed by one of their judges, Gableman, pretty sure that was Wisconsin, who came out and said, I'll show you all the fraud that we had in 2020. So the people of Wisconsin woke up to it and said, you know what? We have to start looking at this, and let's start with no private funding should go into it anymore.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I'm saying that I'm shocked at how much private funding goes into our elections, that our government, not a third world country, by the way,
Yeah.
can't run on a state by state. New Jersey doesn't have the money to run their own state elections to register people. Come on.
Yeah. Wait till you find out how much private money goes into some of our news companies. That would really blow your mind, but. Yeah. All right, what else do we have? Let's go into more fun news. We didn't have much gaming news, but the rules for the Mike Tyson fight got released last week. We're shooting this on Sunday, by the way. And it tips it in Jake Paul's favor, which is what we all kind of expected, which is kind of depressing. But so first thing is they're fighting in 16. Ready? Listen to this. So it's not a real match, Mom. It's barely considered an expedition.
Okay.
16-ounce gloves, that's considered very light or heavy gloves. Exhibition. 16-ounce gloves, it's very hard to knock someone out. And the only way to win is to knock someone out. There's no judging, right? So it only ends in a tie or a draw. And by doing that, it basically makes it seem like Jake Paul won, right? Like, oh, I survived Mike Tyson, so I'm a winner. So that's why it says Mike Tyson confirms key rule, I'm scared to death, because he knows that he probably won't be able to knock Jake Paul out and it'll go to decision. Like if I had to bet money, I would bet that this one goes to decision. They're not going to knock each other out. And because of this, it just kind of ruins the hype behind this fight. But this is on Netflix. So if you have a Netflix account, it's huge. But this is what's kind of a good point that I've heard around the internet. This is Netflix finally opening the doors to allow sports, like a pay-per-view style sport. This is going to be, this could bring boxing to Netflix, which is what Netflix needs, and it's what boxing needs. So whether you like Jake Paul or not, from a sport perspective of bringing eyes to the sport, I don't know if there's ever been someone to do it as much. Like I've heard more about boxing in the last 2 years than I have my whole life just because of Jake Paul. Which is wild to say, but that's just where we're at. So, again, it sucks.
Mike Tyson's a big name for my generation.
Absolutely.
Right?
Bringing the two generations together. Yeah. It's smart from a business perspective. That's why when people are like, oh, those Paul guys are idiots, I think there's some of the best marketing geniuses out there that we don't even realize because of the older shenanigans that they do. But, this is – it's going to be a big deal. But, again, anyone that's like a fight purist – isn't going to want to watch this for the most part. In fact, I mean, I'm sure I'm going to watch it, but I don't know. It's kind of depressing because it's not a real fight. It's not you've basically killed all the rules for an actual boxing match. You might as well just do MMA at this point and change the rules.
It was kind of, I don't know. I mean, it was risky to begin with. Just the optics of it. You know, you have an older fighter fighting a younger guy.
Yeah.
I guess people tried to balance the age with the experience and say, well, it's, it's fair because Tyson's such a legend. But it's such a physical sport that, I don't care. And credit to Mike Tyson. I'm sure he's going to come out looking ripped and he's going to be in phenomenal shape. And I would hope so. But Jake Paul, I'm sure, is already in great shape. So I think that will be the interesting thing is not to say, oh, can Jake Paul last. It's more to see, will Mike Tyson embarrass himself or actually do a good
Yeah,
job?
see, well, I would say the way I see it because of these rules is either way, it's kind of a lose-lose for Paul.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say lose-lose. I guess it's just a lose from a sport perspective. Because remember, he's the guy that went from YouTube to boxing and said, I'm going to commit to boxing and I'm going to be a great boxer.
Right.
And he's done a good job at that. The only problem is, right, he hasn't fought real boxers. He's fought retired UFC fighters and then one somewhat
Right.
mediocre boxer, being Tyson Fury's younger brother, who has had a mediocre career at best, and he lost to him. So now you're fighting Mike Tyson, again, a retired guy who's in his 50s now, or almost 50. No, he's almost 60, right?
No,
I forget. Yeah,
yeah,
almost
he's
60.
50.
Um,
Oops.
so you're good. So in that regard, it's kind of a lose-lose in the sense of you're fighting arguably one of the greats. Well,
Yep.
not even arguably, one of the greats. And it's
Yep.
not really a real fight. So what do you win here? Well, you don't win in the credit of boxing. You win in the sense of Netflix is going to do a deal with you now. That's great.
Well,
I'm sure.
PR.
Yeah.
It's a total PR
Right.
thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But
Well, the only reason there is something wrong with that is because, remember, he was supposed to be in this for boxing. He gave up
Yeah.
everything for boxing, right? And which is great in the sense of if you want to be a boxer, that's awesome. But now you're kind of switching it up to now I'm in it for the money, and that's why I'm doing this deal. So
Yeah.
it's tough because now you kind of lost a little bit of the fan base that was rooting for you because you were putting all your chips into boxing, which we had respect for. We wanted you to
Yeah.
fight more people in your fighting space, and he fought one, but it was really under the wraps, and I think he wasn't sure if he was going to win, so they didn't really promote it. I don't even remember that guy's name, but I feel like this was kind of 2 steps backwards with a big name. Does that make sense? So
the other thing I would say is, who doesn't want to shoot around with Michael Jordan on a basketball court?
I agree. Yeah, that's true.
You know, and whether you love the sport or not, even if you don't think you're going to win or whatever, that's like a once in a lifetime opportunity. So when a Mike Tyson, now your generation, I'm sure you know your fighters and this new one's coming out, but I have yet to know of a Muhammad Ali or a Mike Tyson. I haven't heard, or Rocky, you know, he's a fictitious guy, but I haven't seen anybody elevated to that level yet in your generation. I could be wrong, or current. So when something like that comes along,
Yeah.
and Mike Tyson floats it, even though you think you're trying to be a serious boxer, that's a hard thing to pass up, to say, you know what, I got to spar with Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
on a big day.
The only lack of knowledge I think there is my mom doesn't really know boxing besides like you haven't really paid attention to boxing. Here's why boxing sucks. The best guy we have, arguably, 2 of them really, is Tyson Fury, who's
Yeah, all right, I know that name, yeah.
Tyson Fury is the number 1 boxer, undefeated, blah blah blah. And then you have Deontay Wilder, who's like the big heavyweight, but he lost twice or 3 times to Tyson Fury now. You have Usyk, who Tyson Fury's fighting pretty soon, I believe, unless that got canceled. You have Anthony Joshua. So there are a couple big names in there. The only downside to boxing, though, is, and this is why the sport's completely ruined, Francis Ngannou, who was an MMA fighter who went over to boxing, arguably beat Tyson Fury, right? So when that guy beats the best in the world and doesn't win, everyone kind of loses respect for the sport. So we know everyone unanimously agrees that Francis Ngannou won that fight. Now he goes and fights another boxer and gets knocked out, but that's besides the point. The real issue with boxing is there's always a title fight, but there's so many different titles, Mom, that let's say I lose a fight, I still have 7 other belts.
Right, but the one thing that you're missing from what I'm saying is you follow boxing. I don't, and I know Muhammad Ali.
Right.
I know Mike Tyson. I've heard Tyson Fury's name. The other names I've only heard of because I've heard you guys talk about
it,
them.
right.
That's my point. You don't have to know anything about basketball to know who Michael Jordan
is, yeah, or Tony Hawk.
So,
yeah.
Right. So these are people that are icons for not just for their sport, but they're what you call, kitchen table names. Everybody knows them, and you don't have to follow the sport to know it. So to have an opportunity to box him, I don't care if you say, oh, I only want to have serious boxers. It's a once in a lifetime thing, and Mike Tyson's not going to be boxing probably not in his 70s or whatever. Just like
Oh,
I
I
said,
hope not.
Michael Jordan's not the same player he is, but who in their right mind wouldn't want to shoot around with with
Mike
Michael
Jordan, yeah.
Even just for fun, not even a competition. So that was just my point about maybe that's one thing driving him, even though he's going to get paid a lot of money and it's not classic
Yeah.
boxing. He'll go down, if it's somewhat interesting, people always talk about him because he fought Mike Tyson.
My fear is that because of this, I don't really see Mike Tyson, quote unquote, winning. Again, I think it's going to be a decision and it's going to go to Jake or whatever. My fear is that the younger generation is going to go, oh, Mike Tyson's the guy that lost to Jake Paul. That scares me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the risk, and that's why a lot of people don't quit when they're ahead.
Yeah.
Just enjoy the fact of who you are and what you achieved. Why do you have to prove this? Because it's just kind of a lackluster thing for.
Right.
I don't know, if Mike Tyson wins, it's going to be everyone's just going to assume he didn't win fairly and they gave it to him.
Oh, really? I would think that. Yeah. Again, that's what I mean. It's kind of a lose-lose in the sense of, let's say Mike Tyson does win and knock out Jake Paul. Well, Jake Paul's career is like, he's going to be known as the guy that lost to a 50-year-old, right?
Yeah, right.
Almost 60-year-old. And then if he knocks out Mike Tyson, it's, oh, you beat it. Like, there's no winning for Jake Paul in this, except financially, right? And from a Netflix
I
deal.
would only watch this fight just to see how it gets finessed.
Yeah, right. And
Just
I feel like
how are you going to finesse this?
I feel like the rules are what kind of already finesses it. Right? 16-ounce gloves, no judging.
Right. But, maybe, right. The expectation is this is going to be like a disaster, but it would be interesting. And I think that's even more valuable than the fight itself. How are they going to finesse this to be a win-win for the audience, for Tyson and for Jake Paul? Everybody maintains their dignity and you walk away saying, wow, that was great.
The other part that I think is going to kill it for me is right when they get closer to the fight. I'm not sure when it is. I have to look up the date, but they do a press conference, right? Can you imagine Mike Tyson at 60? Yeah, I'm gonna fuck you up. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be weird. You're gonna 27-year-old trashing a 60-year-old. It's like that'll be interesting because I'd be surprised if they do it that way. I think Jake's gonna be smart about it and be like, "Oh, dude, you're the best of all time. It's an honor to fight you." Whereas I think Mike Tyson, I don't know if you're gonna see the old Mike Tyson, right? The I'm gonna fuck you up. I'm gonna.
Man, he's very good for now. He's had a lot of events in his life. I think he considers himself a born again or he's a Christian. Yeah. And he makes that point of saying that. Yeah. So I don't know if you'll see the trash talk of the old days. I don't think he'll be biting Jake Paul's ear off. That's for certain.
Yeah, I was telling Dad there was a UFC fighter a couple of weeks ago that bit another UFC fighter. He got cut instantly. So yeah. All right, last one. Speaking of fitness, 6 supplements a personal trainer and former bodybuilder takes to grow muscle and stay in shape. So we've been accumulating more of a female fan base, Mother. So I thought this would be good. Fitness expert. Okay. I don't know her name, but she talks about her daily supplements. Now notice Mom's writing down notes. Mom's like, do I have to start taking these? So she was a former competitive bodybuilder, personal trainer, who's now she's talking about the 6 supplements she takes.
Madigan.
Yep, Madigan, 34. So obviously you got your whey protein, right? Protein powder, 1.5 scoops. Usually men do 2, I believe. It's been a while since I've done protein shakes, but she does it with her breakfasts. Protein with her breakfast, great amount of protein. So the rule, we talked about this last night because we were talking about with Dave, who's doing the podcast next week. But with protein, the general rule was you were supposed to do as many grams of protein as your body weight. So you would hit, for me, it would be 200 grams of protein a day, which that's a lot of protein for me. Like I can't put down that much protein, but the protein powder I know supplements a lot of that. So that's a good one. But that one's pretty much standard. The next one is standard too, which is creatine monohydrate, which a lot of people use.
I do know a chem person that we all know said, just be careful with the creatine because it has effects on your liver or your kidneys? People can overdo it. So
and I learned that the hard way. I learned that the hard way in college. I don't know if you remember the story. I definitely told you it before, but when I was a freshman in her session, I was taking creatine, but I wasn't drinking enough water. I think I've told this story before on stream or something, but I think I passed a kidney stone because it was the most painful thing I've ever done in my life because I just remember I was in class. Dr. Buchanan, God rest his soul, because I know he passed away. You remember?
Oh, did he? Oh,
Mom,
I
well,
met
Mom,
him, right?
he passed away within a year of when he retired. Right? I
Oh,
know.
yeah.
I saw that in the news because I was like kind of snooping a little bit. I was wondering if Dr. O'Malley was alive too, but I don't know. But yeah, so I just remember I was in his class. I just had to go to the bathroom or something. I just had like the dropping feeling, when you're on a roller coaster, you get that drop. Yeah. I got that. I said, "Can I go to the bathroom?" Go to the bathroom. I know Dad's had a kidney stone before, but Mom, it was the most painful thing. I must have been paler than white when I walked back into that class. They probably thought I was a drug addict doing drugs in the bathroom.
Oh,
I felt like I was in there forever.
Yeah.
But that was because I wasn't drinking enough water and my kidneys couldn't process it. So what creatine does is it restores or retains more water in your muscles so that it's harder to build up lactic acid in the muscles. So it's very good. I learned, because I was theorizing this with our intern AJ because he's a D1 swimmer. And I said, I wonder if creatine is considered cheating in swimming because it would make you more buoyant because you're retaining more water. So it's actually banned in the sport. I don't know if that's actually why it is, but it's considered a performance enhancing drug, I guess, in college sports.
Yeah,
but
matters in that type of sport.
Yeah. So creatine's a good one. That's a very common one that people who work out take. But this is where it starts getting interesting, guys. Glutamine. So glutamine, I had to look this up because I don't know all of the stuff. Most of these are like body production stuff, which I thought was pretty interesting. Like it's each one helps the breakdown of certain things in the body. So glutamine is an amino acid that I forget which ones it does because all these are pretty much the same. But it boosts your immunity, all that stuff. But it's the breakdown of. It'll come to me. I think it is glucose, or maybe it's glucose that breaks the stuff down. But it speeds up the processes of digestion essentially, and how the body breaks down certain amino acids.
It does a lot for recovery too, which is important.
And then there's hydroxymethyl butyrate, which Dave's definitely mentioned this one to me, and I was like, "Hey, can you say that 10 times fast?" And this one is another. They're all amino acids. I believe that one's just breakdown of the bodies too, like body functions as well, in a good way.
Yeah, it looks like it helps with enhancing strength gain, lean muscle mass. Helps with the stress too. Yeah. Ashwagandha, really?
Ashwagandha. This is the stress relief one. Now, the problem with ashwagandha, which I do take, there's no real great evidence that it actually does anything. So I think it's really just for the stress and relaxation of ashwagandha. Like, I don't think that there's enough studies yet on like the benefits from a workout standpoint of ashwagandha.
Yeah, that's just to make you feel calm. I don't know.
Yeah. So I don't know. They said that it helps with digestion and blah blah blah, and I kind of look all these up, and then ZMAs.
If someone's already working out and doing all this other stuff, I have a hard time thinking why you would be insomniac and what was the other one? And stressful.
Yeah.
Usually exercise takes that away from you, just from your own endorphins and whatnot.
Yeah.
Serotonin levels. I don't know why you would have to. I don't know. That seems like a Joe Rogan throw-in.
Hey, don't make fun of Rogan. Rogan does well. But ashwagandha is, I like them, but I used to take them every day, but I felt like I was kind of killing the effects by taking it every day. So I've kind of gone down to like the twice a week sort of area. So I'll do it on like a Wednesday and a Sunday. And then ZMAs, this is right up your alley, Mom. This is right up your alley. This is the zinc, magnesium, your B6s. It's basically the ultimate multivitamin. And zinc, which, again, I think zinc is bullshit. But
no, it's not.
I live by that. Every time you tell me take a zinc when I start getting sick, I feel worse the next day. And then you go, well, think of how much worse you would have been if you didn't take the zinc.
You have to consistently take it every day, and it helps the body fight. Now, zinc's another one, though. It is not water soluble, so it can build up in your system. You have to be really careful.
You can't take high dosages.
Magnesium, I think you're flexible, but remember I recently got you guys the magnesium supplements. That's supposed to be great for brain development.
My brain can't get any bigger.
Other bodily functions, and she has them for psychological processes as well as muscle function recovery.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the, from what I noticed, a lot of them are just digestion based. Like a lot of them just helps digest, which makes sense because I think nowadays with all the processed foods that we eat, I think it's a lot harder to, I think your body doesn't digest properly, right? I think it's a lot harder for the body to naturally digest stuff because of all the preservatives.
Well, I think what we're losing in this whole discussion, especially for the young people with the rise of all these cancers and turbo cancers, the probiotics are a big deal. And I don't think we do enough of it because so much of our immune system comes from our stomach. And people don't, I mean, I've done probiotics in the past. They are popular when you look out there and you see, you know, the yogurts with it and everything else. A lot of workout people or health conscious people, they always weave a probiotic into it and certain ones because you get billions of the microflora, blah, 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 blah.
They call it, they say that your gut has what's called a gut biome, and you can change your gut biome based on what you eat. And that's kind of what I mean. Like we've been eating so much crap as human beings.
Processed foods.
That our gut biome is thrown off drastically. That's why sometimes I'm a little jealous of the people that have like gluten allergies and stuff because, well, I guess it's not gluten. It's something else. I think I'm confusing it with something else. But like their gut biome is kind of perfect in the sense of it can't eat certain processed things. So it's a lot. Their body already knows, hey, we can't change our biome. Whereas you and I, we should be changing our gut biome, and we have, but just not in a good way. So that's the downside. But yeah, so I thought that was interesting for those of you that are trying to get into better shape. Like all those will work. They're definitely worth trying. And it's not like
I would say is and one size doesn't fit all. So just because this works for her and it's good, and some people want to know, what do you use? She's got her own biology going on, and she's operating out already just looking at her. Her body's functioning and her muscles are functioning.
She says she works out a lot, I'm sure. That's her job.
Works out a lot.
Yeah.
Right. And just because, and I firmly believe this about everything. Yeah, there's a rule of thumb. You should take a certain amount of vitamin C, you should take a certain amount of vitamin D every day, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's different. Everybody's a different size, different everything. You can't hit the right. We're not at a point in society where we can hit that target number and say, if you're this, take this and that and that. To some extent we can, but I really think when you start mixing a lot of, your dad always says, I take so many pills every day, vitamins and supplements, because there's benefits from each thing. And someday I think we'll get to the point where people can do a blood test and say, you know, here's what you need to take. This is how much every day.
I think
we can't get to
oh.
perfect homeostasis. Everything changes every day, and you always have to jiggle it to get what's perfect. So
I think we do have tests that will tell you exactly, but it's just super expensive.
And they don't. Trust me, the pharmaceutical industries, they don't want to do testing on supplements. They don't want to do testing on probiotics and whatnot because you won't need as many as their pharmaceuticals. You know, they don't make money from these supplements. They want you on pills and drugs and whatnot to fix everything in you.
Right.
And a lot of things can be treated, not 100%, but mitigated through the use of supplements. And I think it's a shame that we don't do more with it. The scientific community, many of them poo-poo it and they don't see a benefit, or they'll say, well, look at her, she's a bodybuilder, so obviously she can take this stuff.
What's good about I'll take you the other way just because I think I have a little bit more knowledge in this field. It's not so much that they've negated it in the sense of they're not putting enough into it. I think there's too many things. And like if you know anything about like the power lifters, the Mr. Olympias and stuff, like they take so many supplements in a day. It's like a job. Whereas the reason this article is really good is because that's 6 things that anyone could take at pretty much any time of the day. Like you should see a bodybuilding schedule. It's like, hey, we got to take these 6 pills at lunch. I got to take another 12 for dinner. I got to take 8 before bed. So that's what I mean by
they're operating at a different level.
Exactly.
The average person isn't working towards that, so they don't necessarily need, everything that this Haley Madigan's going to take, because I'm not working out in the gym. My body's not functioning like that every day. Should it be? The average person? No, they're not like that. But to maintain a certain health and ability, you don't necessarily need the combinations that she takes.
That's why I hope that that Brian Johnson guy, I believe it's Brian Johnson, he's the one that's like reversed his age. He's that medical guy
Oh
that
yeah.
he sold his company.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I know everyone makes fun of him. Like, hey, he doesn't look that good. But, like, he could be on to something in the sense of hopefully by the end of his life and into the next company that he started, they'll have a one pill that does everything. That's what we want, so that you don't have to take a bajillion supplements in a day, right? So that's why I find it very interesting what he's doing in the sense of longevity. I don't believe the whole let's live to 500, but if you can live life and not have to take a slew of medicines to look like this,
Because people used to do it all the time.
do what?
Hundreds of years ago, people didn't take supplements, and men and women were in incredible shape. You know why? There was no junk food. They didn't overeat. They couldn't afford to overeat, and you were constantly moving. You were
Hold on, but there's a difference between good
laundry.
But there's a difference between good physical shape and like actual shape, right? Like, for instance, he talks about.
I'm telling you, the lumberjacks of old had the six packs. They had the muscles. They ate good food. There was no process.
Right, but that doesn't mean that
So to say
processes are good. That doesn't mean that bodily functions were good just because you have a six pack, you have muscles. That's not how that works. Right?
No, but I would say to you that people 100 years ago, 200 years ago, were in better physical shape than people today naturally.
But they also
There
lived
were
to
no
like
they didn't
60.
take supplements.
But they didn't
But
live
people
as
didn't-
long, Mom.
Yeah, but that was not so much because they weren't in great shape. It was because they didn't have medical treatments like we have today for other things,
Right,
like dental treatments.
But
and
I
whatnot.
think you're missing what I'm saying here, because that Brian Johnson isn't doing just health like this. He talks about how eye health, his ears, like his canocular, whatever. Like, that's what I mean by
yeah.
So stuff like that is like, that's the longevity I'm talking about. Like, there's 80-year-olds that are in phenomenal shape, right? But that doesn't mean they're healthy.
But I'm saying more average people were in shape compared to today.
Sure.
Some in better shape.
Yeah.
Because you were constantly moving. You didn't have modern day conveniences. Your whole day was exercise, working out. Now, you weren't doing sit-ups and push-ups in a gym like she does or lifting weights. You didn't have to, because you were dragging the ox in the field all day.
Fair,
and that was your muscle building. I mean, that's what I'm saying. And you didn't go home and take your creatine and your protein, whatever else. You didn't even have protein, some of these people, because you could, unless you slaughtered the cow that week and you could afford to. I'm just saying, our lifestyles have created this environment where we now need supplements to get to where people like this are. And not to say everybody looked like her in the old days, obviously, but more people you didn't have obesity back then because people couldn't afford to eat that much and sit in front of a box all day or sit at a cube all day. That just was unheard of.
But then I would wonder, would you rather be fit like 200 years ago but only live to 60, or would you rather be a less than average but live to 90, right? And that's kind of what we have today. Exactly. So that's why I'm hoping Brian Johnson's project will lead to that happy medium for everyone. Not living to 500. I don't need to do that.
Yes,
but,
so, but, not everybody died at 60. Future 10
It
years
was
on,
rare to live past that, though. Yeah, that's like the average. That was like the average person today living to 110. Like, that's not normal. Even living to 100 is pretty rare.
Yeah, that's true, but it's becoming more common. I will say that.
Yeah.
Because of medical interventions, it's becoming more common that people are living. But oftentimes hey, listen, look at my mother. People are shocked when I take her to the doctor. The dentist, when you fill out the form, they actually said to her, oh, you forgot to fill this page out. I said, no, she didn't. She doesn't take any medications. Right. And she's going to be 90 next month. She takes nothing. She takes, an aspirin once in a while. And she is very rare. Most elderly people don't. They're on something. So, good, bad, or indifferent. I wouldn't say she lived an ultra healthy lifestyle. She just has good genetics. Sometimes that plays into it too. And she stayed very, very healthy, which is great. But yeah.
So let's see some podcast questions. I just checked the podcast questions. Literally, Johnny wrote earthquake. So Johnny, Kenny's friend. And it's funny. I've known Johnny for years and I still don't know Johnny's like real name. Like, I don't know his last name.
I do know it.
Yeah.
I can't think of it. Right now.
I'm
I don't want
sure.
to say it on the podcast either, but
Yeah. But and then Michael posted Penn State trip. So we've already knocked down 2 questions.
oh yeah.
Uh, Laffy said, okay, so the question was who's going to win the AI race and who's going the way of the .com bubble. I don't know what he meant by he or she meant by the second half of that, but I asked him to explain. He said, okay, he or she said, late 90s, there was an explosion of tech startup venture capitalism nonsense largely related to the growth of the internet. A great majority of them ended up going bust. All this AI stuff seems similar. Everyone and their mother wants to make an AI assistant or some nonsense. Who's going to win? Who's going to go bankrupt? It is a good question. Now, here's the difference, though, and I think this is the only argument. I think the one that's going to last, obviously, is OpenAI because they're the founder. They're the one that most of these companies go to for information help to set up their AI. I think the other interesting difference between now and the 90s was now you have companies, big companies, trillion-dollar companies, that even if they make an AI that fails, they won't go bankrupt, right? Like Meta, Google. So I think the ones that are going to fail are going to be the ones that are trying to be a startup AI company, because you're putting a lot of money and resources into a product that you don't have any other products yet. So those are the ones, trust me, there are ones going bankrupt every day. 100%. If you look, I'm sure there's AI companies that are going bankrupt because they don't have good AI structures to put into or implement into society or the internet that'll be useful.
Well, unfortunately, I'm just going to say this. I get what she's saying, and I can't answer it because I haven't looked at all the AI companies. But when you have these tech, like the 90s when it went tech, you had the tech bubble, right? It had nothing to do with the quality of the ideas. It had to do with the quality of the financial backing of these companies. And when you had the mortgage market blow up, you get a ripple effect, right? We saw it briefly, what was that, a couple of years ago, that the tech bank out on the West Coast, I can't remember the SV, whatever it was called, Silicon Valley, blah, 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 blah. All the companies panicked because the bank was going under. And they finance all the loans for these smaller tech companies that might be doing phenomenal things in AI, but if they don't have the funding, it's not about the quality of the ideas, it's about the quality of being able to pay for those ideas. So in answer to your question, I don't know who's going to win in the AI industry. There's a real chance that all these companies could suffer quite a bit, depending on, believe it or not, their portfolios, on their financial, how they're set up. So if they have a lot of outside investors and those investors are predicated on, say, the commercial market, well, the commercial market could take a really big dive and interest rates have a lot to do that. When that happens, it's a ripple effect. Now all these people that invest, their values are going down. That takes the tech company down with them, and now all of a sudden no income, no fund.
I think what's more so going to determine it is not so much, well, I guess maybe the markets, as you're saying, but I think it's going to come down to how useful is the AI. Whereas people like ChatGPT is a useful AI because it's constantly being built up. Like people are working on it, making it smarter, blah, blah, blah. And then all these other companies leech off of it to get information for theirs. So they're just essentially, no one's really building from ground zero except for OpenAI, right? They're just telling their AIs to do something differently based off the OpenAI. So OpenAI, I think, is going to be the winner in this no matter what, because they were the first. And when you're the first, you're always going to have one that's learning faster than the others, unless like they stop production for a month, right? And by production, I mean just improving their AI or having it improve itself. Like it's at the point now where it's improving itself, which is scary, but it's just a fact. Excuse me. So I think the answer to that question is, I think that it's going to heavily be determined on which AI is the best. I don't think we're ever going to have one AI. It's going to be kind of like web browsers where you have Firefox, you have DuckDuckGo, you have Safari. It's going to be user dependent on which one you want to use. But I think from a utility standpoint, which is what's the best AI for my construction company, I think you're always going to have an industry standard, kind of like we have with video editing softwares and blah, blah, blah. So it's tough to say which ones are going to go bankrupt, but I'll tell you the ones that do go bankrupt are going to be the ones that don't have a use. Does that make sense?
It makes sense what you're saying, and that's possible, but I still go back to you could have a phenomenal product, and if your financing is not in place,
Right.
you could go under. Not to say that the idea isn't great and somebody will buy it and start from
Right.
ground up and build it, but so many of these you will see this term of the tech bubble, and it doesn't matter what it is, things will go by the wayside because oftentimes they start getting into other areas, they start funding other things, and they try and add companies to enhance their AI, and those companies drag them down, and all of a sudden, blah blah blah. So AI is a funky thing. I could see it going in many directions, including governments, plural, taking it over, and it's not privately held, so it doesn't go bust. It gets run by the government. So whoever rises to the surface, they take it over, right? Look at Microsoft. Microsoft had to, it's been in and out of court. It had to break up. Look at Ma Bell, a technology that they decided was a monopoly, and you had to break it up and make it regional. So, AI could follow down those same paths. Or, to your point, it'll get to the point where all the AI companies will just merge into one thing, and it will become like a common,
just leech off of it, kind of like how they do with
Right.
code.
Right. You'll buy it like you do a cable company. Oh, I'm buying.
I think.
I'm gonna go to AI.
What's interesting is I don't know if we ever thought that we would have. Well, I guess we did, but I don't think any of the big companies are going to go bankrupt over their AI because they already had enough money financially to make an AI kind of on the side. So that's why I think it's going to affect more of the smaller companies like the startups because it's a lot of money to make it. It takes a lot of money to make an AI and have the computers and the servers to keep an AI running. So to your point, it's really how fast finances are going to drain on top of how useful your AI is, right? Or your product is. So there are a lot of factors. I do think that the big ones are always going to last, especially OpenAI, because they're the ones that are the frontier. To your point, if they were, I think the biggest fear is if OpenAI was to sell to somebody. Like if the U.S. government went to OpenAI and says,
gets too big, they break it up. If it becomes too much of a monopoly, you can't have one. Think about it. We're not talking widgets here. We're talking AI. We're talking information. No one company should own all aspects to generating information, creating information, blah, 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 blah. It will get to the point where the countries, plural, will say, you can't have this. It has to be broken up. And you can't, they'll start putting rules and regulations in place and monitoring it and eventually want to take it over completely. And, they'll end up ruining it because anytime government of any kind takes something over, they tend to ruin it. But having said that, I think that if it can only get so big before somebody comes in and says it has to be broken up.
Yeah.
Because it's too powerful.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be one. It's kind of like the next iPhone or smartphone in the sense of it's definitely going to be what revolutionizes the country. Like I do think that this is the next big leap in major technologies in the next 20 years. But there's a lot of, as you know, there's benefits and negatives to that. One being, well, there's a lot, but like, is it taken over or can it think for itself? And now we're getting wrong information. That's where it gets scary.
It should get regulated before it ever gets too big because it just can't be handled. It just can't be controlled. And they're onto it now. The Joe Allens of the world is somebody I've listened to often who talks about. He's talked about it for a while now and just how out of control some of these AI people are who just think it at a level that humans won't exist and that type of thing, and we will no longer be needed as human beings, and we'll go to and they're salivating over this concept. They're not even looking at the humanity side of it. But when you get that big, that's just too overwhelming, and too many world leaders do not want something bigger than they are, and they will shut it down.
To me, it's like the ultimate potential of good or evil in the sense of it can have use cases that are fantastic, like when you look at the Neuralink and how that. I don't know if you saw the guy that is now, I think he was the first patient to have a Neuralink implant successful and blah, blah, blah. Like that's great. But then the negatives that we talk about, it really comes down to the people that are running it, or if the AI decides that is making its own decisions. So again, what we don't know is what are the limitations that OpenAI has given it.
Yeah.
And, well, really just that. Like, what are the limitations and what can it do by itself versus what does it need people for? Because so far it's already single-handedly destroyed industries because we don't need people anymore in certain walks of life or I'm sorry, not walks of life, but certain job paths. So yeah, it really comes down to the uses, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I can't tell you which ones will be better versus the other because you have no way of knowing how the structures of these companies are and
Yeah.
what could impact them with, not to say the information or the ability of their product being AI isn't phenomenal, but a lot of products have fallen by the wayside just because of they didn't get financing or the finance or got taken over. Once it had financial issues, in sweeps the government to say, you know what, we'll take it over and we'll run it, and wind up running into the ground. And it's just it's something that it's a scary thought if it gets into the wrong hands. Question is, I don't know what the right hands are. with something.
Yeah. I wonder, the other thing I wonder is, like, I wonder how many college majors are just going to get decimated in the next 10 years because some AI is going to take it over. I think you're at the point where you have to get at least a minor in some kind of software or computer science because accounting is like essentially dead now. Right now, all of it's AI and computer based and calculator based. Like, I think they could have gotten rid of accounting a while ago just based on the technology that we currently had 5 years ago, but I don't know. That's why I'm like, man, that one's on borrowed time. I have to believe.
Well,
Gender studies might be an option now, Mom.
The jury is still out
Yeah.
on the quality of the AI.
Yeah.
They're not able to get rid of the biases.
Oh.
And it's so blatant that, it's very easy to say, well, you don't need an accountant anymore. You just plug in the information and it shoots out your tax return. And we're finding who's plugging in the information.
Right. Did you see they just made an AI robot for New Jersey gas pumping? It automatically does your gas. How many gas stations, like literally, right? I don't know how many states don't allow you to pump your own gas. I don't know if it's just New Jersey, but I mean, that whole job, it's gone, right? Yeah. Just throw one of these bots in. It literally scans your gas tank and then undoes the thing, puts the gas in. You don't need people anymore, completely.
And for Jersey, sure. But it's great for places like, every other state where you have to pump your own. Yeah. Now you don't even have to get out of your car.
Yeah, exactly.
Which that's an improvement. In New Jersey, it's the loss of a worker. In other states, there was nobody doing it anyhow.
Yeah.
So it's just a pure improvement.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just wild how it's a great question because we can only speculate, obviously, but it's the ultimate good and evil, as I said. It can go one way or another way, and it's going to come down to whoever wants to ruin lives or whoever wants to help lives. So
yeah,
and we have to make sure that the robot's not making the decision.
Yeah, right. The Terminator.
Yeah.
Get the Terminator, or they take over the world.
Yeah. All right, Mom. We just did an hour 40. That was a longer one than you would think. I was nervous about that one because I didn't think I had that many articles. So.
Right, and I'm coming off a trip to Parents Weekend.
And I'm running on like 3 hours of sleep. Yeah, I've been doing work for Uncle all morning, so I've had to do paperwork. So the only thing I have to promote, obviously, two big things. We're going to do the live podcast sometime at the end of the month. Next week, I'm doing it with Dave, and then we're going to do a live podcast for the Fight Companion. We have to call it something else for UFC 300 because that's a big one. So we're still trying to figure out the logistics of that one in the sense of I don't know who's there, who's not. You're welcome to join if you want to. You can listen to Drunk Matt talking about how much he hates women fighting. So...
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's got to be an interesting one. I don't even know if we can stream it to YouTube, honestly. We got to figure out what we're doing there. So that's kind of the biggest news. We're going to figure that one out throughout the week. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I don't think I have anything else except for I put out the start of the walkthrough for Arch Thrones, which is I think a kind of a highly requested walkthrough. So, Mom, just to run you on the news. So these guys made a mod for Dark Souls. You know that game that I play that I platinumed and blah, 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 the one I worked like 10 years on?
Yep.
So these guys made a mod and everyone's struggling with it. And literally Jason and I, we finished it like first. It's so easy. We were like, this is really easy. So we did the walkthrough for it. And now I know it's all over the news on how hard it is. I was like, are we going to finally get on the news? Like the gaming news for the walkthrough? Because I'm the first one to do it.
Good.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. So I'm putting out those walkthroughs now. And that's really it. There's a couple videos I already recorded. I played some sick games over the weekend, so I'll try and get those out as much as possible. But besides that, there's not much else. So only thing else I have to promote is social media, promo code Streamlinks, Discord. And that's pretty much it, guys. So I will see you next week. You'll see Mom in probably 2 weeks. And then we got to figure out what we're doing for the live podcast probably the last week of April, which...
The last week of April.
Well, we could do it whenever.
But... about that. Yeah, we have to look at the schedule because there's a lot going on in the month of April. So, yeah, we'll try and make it work.
Yeah. Oh, well, actually, that's a good point because, right, that weekend, we got to figure out tickets and stuff, but we'll talk about that after stream. So,
yeah.
All right, guys, we will see you later.